We are begging, if anyone knows anything, his friends, strangers, please call the hotline.
Well, the investigation into the death of Nolan Wells continues. NBC News is learning that the Mississippi State autopsy is now complete. Aaron Gilchrist has more on the new videos emerging from the day he disappeared.
Tonight, that state autopsy report now in the hands of investigators. The results have not been made public. The examination of Nolan Wells' body was conducted on July 7th, one day after he was found dead at the Barrier Island, where he spent the 4th of July holiday with friends. This as new video surfaces appearing to show Nolan at different points during the day. The Officer Tatum podcast posting surveillance video from the boat launch where Nolan and his friends departed on the morning of July 4th. The podcast also airing video and NBC News analysis confirms is from Horn Island on July 4th. You see dozens of boats and people in the water, the show's host claiming Nolan is among them. Another clip aired on the podcast appears to show Nolan's friend's boat being towed. Nolan does not appear to be on it. One of Nolan's friends who traveled home on the boat said they left because the boat malfunctioned and that Nolan decided to stay behind. Meanwhile, Nolan's mother, as administrator of his estate, making several legal moves, this week sending subpoenas to several social media companies for information and content from his accounts. Today, Nolan's mother again asking her community to speak up.
And Nolan did know how to swim, confirmed that with his mother. He was very good shape, 6'1", 180 pounds, football player. But if he panicked, if he was, had a lot of sun that day, maybe he just wasn't 100%. If he did get sucked out into that ramp, it's possible that he drowned. And I don't think he went too far off because it wasn't too long when he washed up right back in the spot where he was last seen.
Listen, you're a dad. I'm a dad. We send our children out, and first of all, regardless of what ethnicity, regardless of what color we're talking about here, we send our children out, and you're the only one that doesn't come home alive. I'll be damned if the Chris Cuomo that I know doesn't want answers and doesn't expect answers. You know me, and I'm going to push for answers. So for no one to have answers as to what happens is when the suspicion elevates exponentially.
Obviously, we mentioned that there are a lot of questions sort of surrounding this entire situation. So for you guys, what have been some of the biggest questions, some of the most even, now unanswered questions, and how have the questions changed since when you guys got into this around the 4th of July versus where we are today?
Yeah, the biggest question for me is that the last, or as far as eyewitnesses that I've spoken to, the last set of eyes that were on Nolan were approximately 4 o'clock on July 4th. Sometime after that, there seems to be kind of a black hole where nobody can see or account for him. Obviously, he went into the water at some point. We don't know when, and did not come out alive. And he was discovered on Monday morning, almost about a day and a half later. So obviously, there's some questions there.
This loss, this grief, this pain, it's different.
His phone was sitting in someone else's house. His keys were gone. And the people who were supposed to bring him home went home without him. That detail alone should stop you cold. Not because it answers anything, but because it raises a question that nobody, not law enforcement, not the friend group, not the family, has been able to fully explain. How does an 18-year-old end up stranded on an island in the middle of the Gulf Coast without his phone, without his keys, and without a single person in his circle raising the alarm until hours later? Nolan Wells left for Horn Island on the 4th of July the same way millions of young people spend that holiday, on a boat, surrounded by friends, headed toward a day of music and sun and water. He never made it back. And what happened in the hours between the time his friends say they last saw him and the moment his body was pulled from the water, remains one of the most contested, most painful, and most unresolved questions in recent memory. Here is what makes this case different from everything else you have seen covered. The people closest to Nolan, not strangers, not internet sleuths, not anonymous sources. The people who grew up with him, who rode with him, who knew exactly how he moved through the world, are on record saying the official story does not match the person they knew. And they are saying it with their names attached. Tonight on Unsolved Files, we are going to walk you through every layer of this case. The forensic questions that remain sealed, the contradictions between multiple accounts, and the voice of the one person who may have known Nolan Wells better than anyone else. What he said publicly, on camera, changes the shape of this story entirely. Before we go any further, This case involves the death of a teenager and contains details that some viewers may find deeply unsettling. The forensic information, the circumstances surrounding his final hours, and the accounts from those who loved him are all covered here with care, but with full honesty. Viewer discretion is advised. If you are new to Unsolved Files, this is exactly what we do. No noise. No sensationalism. Just the verified facts, the real name sources, and the questions that still do not have answers. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a case, and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We have viewers from every corner of the globe and we want to hear from you. Now let's get into it. Horn Island is not the kind of place you stumble onto by accident. It sits 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a federally protected barrier island with no shelters, no restrooms, and no cell service. You get there by boat, and when you are out there, you are cut off. That isolation is part of the draw. Every 4th of July, it pulls in crowds. July 4th, 2026 was no different. The boat carrying Nolan and his group arrived at Horn Island shortly after 11 a.m. The friend group on that vessel included Traces Tin Shepard, Warren Hudson, Wyatt Pyron, Jack Spatalo, Morgan Seymour, and Eric Alcantara. Nolan was the only black teenager among them. Jayvon Williams, Nolan's closest friend, was supposed to be on that same boat. He did not make it on. The boat filled up before he could board, so he arranged his own ride and reached the island separately. He saw Nolan out there that day. That detail matters and we will come back to it. When the group arrived, the island was manageable. A gathering. Their circle plus a few others. But 4th of July on Horn Island builds fast. Warren Hudson later described it to podcast host Brandon Tatum on the Officer Tatum Show. 1 minute it was their group, then it was 50 people around them, then it kept growing. By the afternoon, the island had somewhere between 300 and 400 people on and around it. Boats packed close together in the water. Music. And by Hudson's own account, plenty of drinking. It was, in his words, a big party. That afternoon is where the timeline starts to matter most. Around 3 p.m., multiple sources place Nolan as still on the island and accounted for. This is the last confirmed point at which the friend group says they had eyes on him. Ashley Cole, a local chancery judge and Warren Hudson's mother, confirmed that her son last saw Nolan around that time. Cole also confirmed the boat departed Horn Island at approximately 4:30 p.m. What happened between 3 p.m. and that departure is the central unresolved question of this case. But before we get into the competing accounts of those final hours, it is worth establishing what the physical evidence actually shows, because GPS data does not lie, even when accounts conflict. CBS News obtained GPS records from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources tracking the movements of the boat that carried Nolan to the island. According to those records, the vessel left Horn Island and returned to its original dock. It then moved into Fort Bayou at 5:52 p.m., returned to the dock at 6:06 p.m., and made one final movement back toward the Fort Bayou boat launch at 7:19 p.m. That data confirms the departure timeline. It aligns with what Cole and others described about when the boat left. What it does not tell us is who was on that boat when it pulled away from Horn Island. It does not tell us whether Nolan made a deliberate decision to stay behind or whether something else entirely kept him there. The GPS tracked a vessel. It did not track a person. And Nolan Wells never made it back to the mainland. The people who were with Nolan that day have not stayed silent. Multiple members of that friend group have given public accounts of what happened in those final hours on Horn Island. Before anything else is layered onto this case, those accounts deserve to be heard fully and on their own terms. Traces Tin Shepard was among the first to speak publicly. He sat down with ABC News and Good Morning America and described the afternoon in detail. According to Shepard, Nolan met a girl on the island that day. He genuinely liked her. The connection was real enough that when the group's boat was preparing to leave, Nolan chose to stay behind. Shepard said it was one of those things, the kind of spontaneous decision a young person makes on a holiday afternoon. He was clear that this was Nolan's choice, not something that was forced or rushed. Shepard also told investigators the same thing, and he stated that every member of the group cooperated fully with authorities from the beginning. Shepard also addressed something that had been spreading rapidly online, a video that some people claimed showed an altercation involving Nolan. He confirmed on record that the voice heard in that footage is his own, not Nolan's. The confrontation captured in the video involved Shepard and another man over a dispute concerning Shepard's girlfriend. Nolan was nearby at the time but was not part of that confrontation and does not appear in the footage. Rolling Stone separately reported that Shepard's account of that incident was corroborated by his girlfriend and his uncle, both of whom were present on the island that day. Jayvon Williams, speaking to CNN, confirmed independently that the voice in the video sounded like Shepard's, though he said he could not determine from the footage alone whether the figure shown was Nolan or not. Warren Hudson gave his own account in a separate interview with Brandon Tatum on the Officer Tatum show. Hudson was not on the same boat as Nolan, he was on a different vessel. But he was there that afternoon and he described the situation around the departure as an emergency. The bilge pump on Nolan's boat was failing. Water was getting in. The group needed to move. Hudson said they did not simply leave Nolan without a word. They asked him to get on the boat. Nolan declined. He wanted to stay with the girl. In Hudson's account, that was a decision Nolan made himself with the information available to him at that moment. Hudson also added a detail worth noting. He said he later spoke personally with someone who told him they saw Nolan still on the island as late as 6 p.m., more than an hour and a half after the friend group's boat had already departed. He further stated that when the group left, there were still dozens of boats around the island. His group was not the last presence out there that afternoon. Additional context came through a screenshot posted publicly, attributed to Ashley Cole, Warren Hudson's mother and a local chancery judge. The message described Wyatt Pyron asking Nolan repeatedly to board the boat at 5 p.m. Nolan wanted to stay with a girl whose boat was parked nearby. Wyatt's boat then began taking on water and was eventually towed. This account has now been told across multiple interviews by multiple people over multiple weeks. That kind of consistency is not nothing. It is a real signal and it deserves honest weight. But it is only half the picture. What comes next changes the shape of this case entirely. Subscribe to Unsolved Files right now, because the voice you are about to hear knew Nolan Wells longer than anyone else featured in this story, and what he said publicly cannot be set aside. Every account of Nolan's final hours on Horn Island points to one person he spent time with that afternoon. She has been referenced in nearly every public statement made by the friend group. She is the reason, according to multiple sources, that Nolan chose to stay behind when the boat left. Her name is Katie McCormack. She is 19 years old, a student from a town east of Ocean Springs. She was not part of Nolan's group that day. She came to Horn Island with her own separate circle of friends and had no prior connection to the events that would unfold after she and Nolan crossed paths that afternoon. Katie has not spoken publicly about this case. She has not given interviews. She faces no allegations of wrongdoing of any kind. That needs to be stated plainly because her name has circulated widely online, often without that context attached to it. The person who did speak on record is her sister, Gracie McCormack. Gracie spoke to the Daily Mail and provided the clearest picture available of what Katie experienced that day. According to Gracie, Katie was with Nolan on the island that afternoon. The two spent time together. But when the time came for people to start heading back to the mainland, Katie's understanding was that Nolan would be getting on the boat he arrived on. She assumed the friends around him telling him it was time to go would not have left without him. From where Katie stood, there was no reason to believe he would end up stranded. Katie did not leave with Nolan's group. She left the island separately, traveling back with her own brother and his fiancée. Gracie also confirmed that the McCormack family has cooperated fully, both with investigators and with Nolan's family directly. They have provided every answer they are able to give. What Katie did not know when she left that island was that Nolan was still on it. And by the time anyone realized he was missing, the window to find him had already been closing for hours. The friend group's account had held for weeks. Multiple people, multiple interviews, one consistent story. But consistency across a group is only as reliable as the foundation it rests on. And the foundation of this particular story, that Nolan Wells willingly stayed behind, was about to be challenged by the one person whose knowledge of Nolan ran deeper than anyone else in this case. Jayvon Williams sat down with CNN anchor Laura Coates and spoke on the record with his name attached, about what he believed happened on Horn Island. Jayvon was not an outsider building a theory from screenshots. He was there that day. He saw Nolan on the island. He has known Nolan his entire life. And what he told Laura Coates did not line up with the version of events the friend group had been telling for weeks. His position was direct. He does not believe Nolan would have told his group to leave without him. Not because of a feeling. Not because of grief. But because of a pattern he said he personally watched hold for years without a single exception. If Nolan rode with you, he came back with you. That was not a preference or a tendency. According to Jayvon, that was simply how Nolan operated, every single time. That kind of claim carries a specific weight. It is not vague. It is testable. Either that pattern existed the way Jayvon described it or it did not. And Jayvon was not the only one who would say it did, but that comes in the next chapter. Jayvon also raised the phone. He said he could not imagine Nolan agreeing to stay on a remote island without at minimum asking to get his phone back before the boat left. That detail sits at the center of one of the most unresolved questions in this entire case. Why Nolan ended up on Horn Island without his phone and without his keys. Jayvon did not have an answer for that. What he had was a clear statement that it did not fit the person he knew. Here is what must be said clearly. Jayvon Williams was not present for the specific moment the boat left. He did not hear the conversation between Nolan and the friend group in those final minutes before departure. He is not offering an eyewitness account of that moment. What he is offering is a character-based contradiction, years of observed behavior that makes the accepted version of events feel wrong to someone who actually knew Nolan from the inside. That is a meaningful category of evidence. It is not the same as watching something happen. Both things can be true at once. There is one more thing Jayvon said publicly that deserves its own acknowledgement. He stated on record that he does not believe race is at the center of what happened in this case. He offered that position voluntarily, with full awareness of how charged the public conversation around this case had become. He did not frame it to generate sympathy or attention. He said what he actually believed, even knowing it would cut against a significant current of opinion online. That kind of honesty in the middle of a case this loud is not common, and it matters. Jayvon Williams spoke from the position of a best friend. Someone who grew up alongside Nolan, who rode with him, who watched how he moved through the world across years of shared experience. His doubt about the official account came from that place. Personal, specific, and built on a pattern he witnessed firsthand. Now consider that Nolan's own father arrived at the exact same doubt. Independently. Without appearing to coordinate with Jayvon. Without referencing his account. Just a father drawing on his own years of knowing his son, landing in the same place. Elmore Wansley Sr. has stated publicly that the family cannot understand why Nolan would have separated from the group he came to the island with. And he was clear that this was not a vague parental instinct. It was a specific principle he actively taught Nolan. One he repeated consistently, including when Nolan was heading to parties in other cities during his first year of college. The instruction was straightforward. If you go with 5, you come back with 5. Do not separate from the group. Safety is in numbers. Elmore said Nolan always acknowledged it. Always said yes, sir. The principle was not new to him and it was not something he had ever been known to disregard. Elmore also noted something specific about the night Nolan went missing. The first call Christine received did not come from Nolan. It came from a friend. Nolan himself never called. Never texted. On a night when he was supposed to be finding his own way back from a remote island with no cell service, there was no communication from him at all, which for a son who had grown up understanding the importance of checking in, stood out to his father as wrong. The timing of that weekend matters too. Nolan was not out there being reckless. He was on his last free weekend before reporting back to Southwest Mississippi Community College for preseason football camp. A summer of serious training was behind him. He had matured into understanding what his father had been telling him for years, that football at that level is a business, not just a game. That is the son Elmore knew. Disciplined. Accountable. Never the one to separate from his group. Two people. Two entirely different relationships to Nolan. The same doubt. That is not coincidence. It is a signal, and it has not been explained away. While the public debate was building around what happened on Horn Island, something quieter was unfolding that same night. A sequence of phone calls, location trackers, and a 15-minute wait in front of a dark house that raised its own set of questions. It started with Christine Wansley reaching out to Tashima Hance, Jayvon's mother. Nolan had not been heard from. Christine needed to locate him and she started working through the people she knew. Tashima began making calls. The first person she reached was Jayvon, a separate individual from Jayvon Williams, not the same person. Jayvon had been with his girlfriend that evening and had already spoken with Jayvon earlier. He confirmed he had not seen Nolan since they were all on the island. That was the last anyone in that circle had eyes on him. Tashima called Jalen next. No answer. She then called Leron Broomfield, another friend in the group, who picked up. Leron had Jalen nearby and put him on the phone. Jalen confirmed he had not heard from Nolan either. At that point the question shifted from where is Nolan to where is his phone. Two different pieces of tracking technology were producing two different answers at the same time. Christine's own location tracker showed the phone in one place. Nolan's Snapchat showed it somewhere else entirely. Two signals. Two locations. On the same night a mother was trying to find her son. Tashima went to the location the Snapchat tracker indicated. When she arrived, the lights inside the home were off. There were multiple teenagers inside. She asked for the phone. It took approximately 15 minutes to get it back. During that wait, there was confusion about who actually had possession of the phone. She was told it was in Wyatt Pyron's truck. Then someone said a girl would bring it out instead. The phone eventually came back, but the delay and the conflicting explanations around something as straightforward as returning a missing teenager's phone have stayed in the record of this case. Here is where a direct factual discrepancy enters the picture. Christine Wansley later confirmed publicly that Nolan's phone had been found on the boat, not retrieved from a house. Two on-record accounts pointing to two different locations for the same phone. That discrepancy has not been officially resolved. What both accounts agree on is the question underneath all of it. Nolan Wells left Horn Island, or was left on it, without his phone and without his keys. No clean explanation for how that happened has been put forward by anyone. That question is still open. What comes next is where the medical evidence enters this case, and it raises more questions than it answers. Subscribe to Unsolved Files and turn on notifications. When this case moves, you will not want to be the last to know. 2 days after Nolan Wells was last seen on Horn Island, a National Park Service agent discovered his body in the water off the island's shoreline on the morning of July 6. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind responded and made an initial assessment. His finding at that stage was that there were no immediate obvious signs of foul play or trauma on the body. Given the circumstances, a young man last seen on a remote island surrounded by water, Lind made the decision to request a full autopsy from the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office to determine at a deeper level whether any trauma or foul play was present. That state autopsy has since been completed. Its results have not been released to the public. They are sealed, expected to be presented to a grand jury as part of the standard process for unnatural or suspicious deaths in Jackson County. The family was not prepared to wait on the state's timeline alone. On July 10th, civil rights attorney Ben Crump stood alongside civil rights activist Al Sharpton and Nolan's parents, Elmore Wansley Sr. and Christine Wells Wansley, at a press conference held at the National Action Network headquarters in New York. Crump announced that the family had commissioned an independent autopsy. Their position was direct. The existing account of what happened to their son was not adding up, and they wanted answers from a source they had selected themselves. That independent examination was funded by Colin Kaepernick and conducted in Washington, D.C. On July 22, Ben Crump stood before attendees of the NAACP National Convention in Chicago and announced the results alongside Nolan's parents. The finding: undetermined pending investigation. The pathologist who conducted the examination acknowledged multiple limitations in the report. One of those limitations was significant. The independent examiner received Nolan's body without his lungs, without his throat tissue, and without the original autopsy photographs taken during the state examination. The lungs were retained by the state medical examiner, a standard practice in cases where drowning is being evaluated, since lung condition can help establish whether water entered the airways. But the throat and neck tissue were also absent. No official explanation for that specific retention has been made public. Former Special Prosecutor and Crime Stories with Nancy Grace host Nancy Grace addressed both of these points during a televised appearance on Fox News with host Griff Jenkins. She raised a specific finding from the independent autopsy: isolated deep red discoloration of the tissue beneath the skin on the back of Nolan's skull, located at the occipital bone. Nancy Grace noted this was not consistent with the normal postmortem settling of blood in the body, which distributes to the lowest point after death. This discoloration was isolated to that one location. She was careful to acknowledge multiple accidental explanations, contact with a boat in the water among them, and stated plainly that she did not know what it meant. But she also said she would not stop asking until there was a real answer. The missing throat and neck tissue drew her concern for a separate reason. She questioned what the original examiner found in that region significant enough to retain separately from the rest of the body. Forensic pathologist Dr. Carl Wigren, speaking independently to CNN and not connected to this case, provided important context on the broader forensic challenge here. Drowning, he explained, is one of the most difficult conclusions to reach in forensic pathology precisely because no single finding confirms it on its own. Examiners look for indicators including fluid in the airways and changes in the skin of the palms. He also confirmed that determining whether someone was conscious or unconscious before entering the water is something autopsy findings cannot always establish. Ben Crump pushed back separately on the accidental drowning framing, pointing to Nolan's athleticism and his ability to swim as factors that made a straightforward accidental drowning harder to accept without more answers. NAACP President Derek Johnson echoed that doubt publicly, stating he did not believe the death was accidental. 2 autopsies. One sealed. one inconclusive, and a growing list of questions the medical evidence has raised without resolving. This case did not stay contained to Mississippi. It moved across the country fast, and as it did, it picked up weight that went well beyond the facts on the ground. To cover this case honestly means addressing that broader context directly, what has been documented, who said what, and where the lines are between confirmed fact and public speculation. The starting point is straightforward. Nolan Wells was the only black teenager among his friend group on Horn Island that day. The gathering itself was predominantly white. And this happened in Mississippi, a state whose racial history is not abstract or distant. That context is part of why this case drew national attention as quickly as it did. Those are facts, not interpretations. Ben Crump and the Wells family have been specific about where their concern regarding race is directed. Their position has not been that race caused what happened to Nolan on the island. Their concern has been focused on how the investigation itself has been handled, the pace of it, the information made available to the family, and whether the same urgency would have existed if the circumstances were different. That distinction matters, and it has often been lost in the broader online conversation. Not everyone close to this case has framed it the same way. Jayvon Williams, who knew Nolan better than almost anyone, stated on record and voluntarily that he does not believe race is at the center of what happened. He offered that position knowing full well what the public conversation looked like. He was not dismissing the larger context. He was giving his honest read of the specific situation. That position sits alongside NAACP President Derek Johnson's publicly expressed doubt that Nolan's death was accidental. Two people, both invested in this case, landing in different places on the same question. Jackson County NAACP President Curly Clark and Nolan's grandfather Christopher Wells Sr. both made public statements condemning the spread of unverified rumors circulating online. Their call for accuracy was separate from their support for a full and transparent investigation. What the online environment around this case produced went far beyond debate. The FBI confirmed it is actively investigating threats made against individuals connected to the case. A man from Sacramento, California was indicted by a federal grand jury and arrested on July 30th for sending threatening messages on Facebook targeting people involved in the case. A woman from Ohio was arrested the following day on similar charges. Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, and Morgan Seymour launched a GiveSendGo fundraiser to defend against potential lawsuits and to pursue slander and libel claims against those spreading false information about them. By August 3rd, that fundraiser had raised over $90,000. Christine Wansley received hate mail. Ashley Cole and her son were forced to delete their social media accounts entirely due to the volume of threats directed at them. An AI-generated video falsely depicting Christine also circulated online. Christine addressed it publicly and debunked it herself. This is what the case became outside of Mississippi. An investigation still without answers, surrounded by noise that has made finding those answers harder for everyone involved. Here is where this case actually stands as of August 2026. Not where people online say it stands. Not where either side of the public debate wants it to be. Where the verified facts place it. The state autopsy conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office is complete. Its results remain sealed and are expected to be presented to a grand jury. That grand jury has not yet convened. Until it does, the official medical findings in this case are not available to the public, to the family, or to anyone outside the process. The independent autopsy returned a finding of undetermined pending investigation. Toxicology results have not been publicly released. The missing throat and neck tissue has not been officially addressed by any authority. The discrepancy between the two on-record accounts of where Nolan's phone was recovered has not been resolved. As of August 2, 2026, authorities have stated publicly they do not suspect foul play in Nolan's death. That is the official position. It is also a position that a sealed autopsy and a pending grand jury could still change. Official positions in active investigations are not final until the investigation is closed. This one is not closed. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has confirmed the investigation remains active and ongoing. His office has made a specific public request. Anyone who was on Horn Island on July 4th and has original unedited video or photo evidence, particularly footage depicting any altercations or images believed to include Nolan Wells, has been asked to come forward. That request is still standing. Ben Crump's team and investigators from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office have agreed to conduct a mutual inspection of Nolan's phone. That inspection has not yet produced any publicly disclosed findings. What this case has, beyond the open investigation, is two people who were closest to Nolan Wells, his lifelong best friend Jayvon Williams and his father Elmore Wansley Sr., both saying independently that the accepted account of what happened does not match the person they knew across years of real relationship. Neither was present for the specific moment in question. Neither has offered eyewitness evidence of what happened on that island. What they have offered is a pattern-based contradiction built on years of knowing him, and that contradiction has not been explained away by anyone. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He made salmon for his family the night before he left. He was 4 days away from reporting back for football camp. He never came home. This case has no verdict. It has no close. It has a family waiting for answers and an investigation that is still moving. When it moves again, Unsolved Files will be here, with the same standard we applied to every chapter of this story. No noise. No agenda. Just the verified facts and the real questions that still do not have answers. If this case matters to you, subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you are the first to know when something breaks. Drop a comment below. Tell us what question from this case you want answered most. We read every single one.